Dr. Velna's clawed fingers trembled as she stared at the medical readout for the third time that morning. The Crixian geneticist had worked at the Galactic Medical Institute for 20 years, analyzing DNA from hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. She had seen genetic anomalies before, mutations that defied explanation, even a few cases that had stumped her completely. But she had never seen anything like this. The human patient's name was Tyler Bennett, a mining engineer from one of Earth's outer colonies. 3 days ago, he'd been working a standard shift on Theta Station when the tunnel collapsed. 2 tons of rock and metal had come down on him like the fist of an angry god. His crew found him 40 minutes later, buried under debris that should have turned him into paste. They pulled him out expecting a corpse. Instead, they found Tyler still breathing, his eyes open and aware, asking if everyone else was okay. The rescue team thought it was adrenaline keeping him conscious. Shock, maybe, delaying the inevitable shutdown of his body. They rushed him to the nearest medical facility, which happened to be the Institute, expecting to pronounce him dead within the hour. That was 3 days ago and Tyler wasn't dead. He wasn't even dying. He was healing. Velna pulled up the initial scans from his arrival. The damage had been catastrophic. Compound fractures in both legs and his left arm. 3 broken ribs, one of which had punctured his lung. Internal bleeding in his abdomen. A skull fracture that should have caused irreversible brain damage. The kind of injuries you saw in textbooks under the heading unsurvivable trauma. Except Tyler had survived. More than that, he was recovering at a rate that violated every principle of human biology Velna had ever studied. She switched to the current scans taken just an hour ago. The fractures had already knitted themselves back together, the bone showing signs of calcification that normally took weeks to develop. The internal bleeding had stopped completely, the damaged organs regenerating tissue at an impossible rate. Even the skull fracture was healing, new bone forming to bridge the gap. It was miraculous. It was terrifying. And according to the genetic analysis, it was completely unexplainable. Velna had run Tyler's DNA through every database the Institute had access to. The results should have come back identifying him as human, subspecies Homo sapiens, with all the standard genetic markers that characterized his species. Instead, every single database had returned the same message in blinking red letters. No match found. She thought the equipment was broken. The Institute's systems were old, constantly glitching, perpetually underfunded by the Galactic Council's eternal budget cuts. So she ran the test again on a different machine. Then a third time on the backup system in the research wing. Same result. Every single time. No match found. It was impossible. Every known species in the galaxy had a genetic signature on file, cataloged and cross-referenced in databases that span thousands of years of record-keeping. Even the most isolated human colonies, the ones that had been cut off from Earth for generations, still showed up as human. Their DNA might have drifted a bit, adapted to local conditions, but the core markers were always there. Tyler Bennett's core markers were nowhere to be found. Dr. Velna? A nervous voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Jorik, one of the young Torvin interns, hovering in the doorway. His eye stalks were swiveling in that way they did when he was anxious. The patient's vitals are spiking again. His core temperature is reading 39 degrees Celsius now. Velna frowned. That's within normal parameters for a human under physiological stress. It was 37 degrees 10 minutes ago, doctor. And it's still climbing. That got her attention. She abandoned her workstation and followed Jorik to the monitoring station, where a wall of screens displayed Tyler's vital signs in real time. Sure enough, his body temperature was rising. 39.2 degrees. 39.4 degrees. 39.6 degrees. At this temperature, a human should be suffering from a serious fever. Their immune system should be in overdrive, fighting off some kind of infection. But Tyler's other vitals told a completely different story. His heart rate was slow and steady, the rhythm of someone in deep, peaceful sleep. His blood pressure was perfect. His brain activity showed none of the stress patterns associated with fever or illness. Has he woken up? Velna asked. Not since this morning, Jorik replied. He was awake for about 20 minutes, asked for water, ate some food. Said he felt fine. Then went back to sleep. Felt fine, Velna repeated slowly. His bones were shattered 3 days ago and he felt fine. She stared at the monitors, her mind racing. Something was happening to Tyler Bennett, something that went beyond accelerated healing. His body wasn't just repairing itself, it was changing, adapting, becoming something other than what it had been before. Velna made a decision that would alter the course of her career, and possibly the fate of human-alien relations across the galaxy. She walked back to her laboratory and locked the door behind her. Then she opened a connection to a database she'd never used for medical diagnosis before, the Institute's paleontology archives. It was a massive collection of genetic samples from extinct species across 1,000 worlds, preserved in digital amber for researchers studying evolutionary dead ends and vanished ecosystems. She uploaded Tyler Bennett's complete genetic sequence and set the computer to run a comparison scan against every extinct species on file. Then she waited. The analysis took nearly an hour, the computer churning through millions of samples, looking for similarities that shouldn't exist between a living human and something that died long before humans ever left their home world. Velna spent the time pacing her small laboratory, her tail lashing behind her in agitation. This was absurd. She was wasting precious time on a theory that had no basis in anything resembling rational science. The computer chimed and Velna's breath caught in her throat. Match found, 47.3% genetic similarity. Her hands shook as she pulled up the results. She expected to see some extinct human ancestor, maybe one of the evolutionary branches that had died out tens of thousands of years ago. Neanderthals or Denisovans or one of the other subspecies that had shared Earth with modern humans before vanishing into history. What she found instead made her sit down heavily, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. The screen showed a three-dimensional reconstruction of a creature that looked like something out of human mythology. 15 meters long from snout to tail, with massive wings folded against its sides and a neck that curved like a serpent. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could have torn through steel. The skull was massive, filled with teeth designed for rending and tearing. The species designation read, Draconis rex. Extinct megafauna, Earth, late Cretaceous period. Complete extinction event approximately 66 million years ago. A dragon. Tyler Bennett shared 47% of his genetic code with a dragon. Velna spent the next 2 days convinced she was losing her mind. She ran the genetic comparison 17 more times, using different equipment, different algorithms, even borrowing processing time from the Institute's main quantum computer when nobody was looking. Every single test came back with the same impossible result. Tyler Bennett's DNA matched an extinct Earth species that had died out millions of years before humans even existed. She couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. The implications were too staggering, too dangerous. So instead, she did what any good scientist would do when faced with the impossible. She called someone who might actually believe her. Dr. Nathan Cross picked up on the third ring, his face appearing on her comm screen with a confused expression. The human archaeologist was in his lab on Earth, surrounded by displays showing ancient artifacts and fossil reconstructions. Velna? It's 3 in the morning here. This better be good. I need you to look at something, Velna said without preamble. And I need you to promise not to laugh. The last time you said that, you'd accidentally mixed up samples and thought you'd discovered a new species. It turned out to be a contaminated petri dish. This is different. Nathan, I'm serious. What I'm about to show you could change everything we know about human evolution. That got his attention. Nathan leaned forward, his tired eyes suddenly alert. All right, you've got my interest. Send it over. Velna transmitted the data, watching Nathan's face as he pulled it up on his own screens. She saw confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. This is a joke, right? Nathan said slowly. You've doctored this somehow. Maybe it's some kind of Crixian humor I don't understand. I've run this test 19 times, Nathan. On different equipment. The results are always the same. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through the genetic data with the focused intensity she'd seen in him before when he was working through a difficult problem. Finally, he looked up at her, and his expression had changed completely. If this is real, he said carefully, then we need to be very careful about who finds out. Because this doesn't just rewrite human history, Velna. This could start a panic. I know. Do you? Because I'm looking at genetic data that says humans share DNA with creatures that, according to every piece of fossil evidence we have, should be completely unrelated to our evolutionary line. Dragons weren't mammals. They weren't even close. They were more like reptiles maybe, though even that's debated. And yet this human patient of yours shares nearly half his genetic code with them. There's more, Velna said quietly. She pulled up Tyler's medical scans, showing Nathan the impossible healing rates, the rising body temperature, the physiological changes that were accelerating day by day. He's not just carrying dormant dragon genes, Nathan. They're active. They're changing him. Nathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was deeply stressed. How is he feeling? Is he in pain? Disoriented? That's the strangest part. He says he feels fine. Better than fine, actually. He told me yesterday that he's never felt more energized in his life. His senses are sharper. He can hear conversations from 2 rooms away. His vision has improved to the point where he can read text from across the medical bay. And his strength. Velna paused, pulling up a video file. Watch this. The footage showed Tyler in the physical therapy room, supposedly doing basic exercises to test his recovery. In the video, he lifted a weight bar that should have required both hands and considerable effort. Instead, he lifted it with one hand, barely straining, then looked confused when the therapist stared at him in shock. He didn't even realize what he'd done, Velna explained. The therapist told me that bar weighs 80 kilograms. Tyler lifted it like it was nothing. Nathan was silent for a long moment. Have you tested other humans? Is Tyler unique, or could there be more? That's what I need your help with. I need access to human genetic databases, large population samples. If Tyler has these genes, maybe others do too. Maybe they've always been there, just dormant until something triggered them. The mining accident, Nathan said, understanding dawning. What was he exposed to? Velna pulled up the incident report. The tunnel collapse released a pocket of crystallized minerals that had been sealed for millions of years. The rescue team's report mentioned unusual compounds they'd never seen before. Tyler was buried in the stuff for 40 minutes before they pulled him out. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly racing through the implications. Ancient minerals, sealed away since the time of the dinosaurs, somehow activating dormant genetic code in a human. Velna, do you realize what this suggests? That dragons weren't just animals, Velna said softly. That they were intelligent enough to understand genetics, to manipulate it somehow. That before they died out, they found a way to preserve themselves in the species that would eventually evolve to replace them. They seeded early primates with their DNA, Nathan breathed. Millions of years ago they knew they were dying out, so they made sure something of them would survive. They made us their inheritors. It sounded insane. It violated every principle of evolutionary biology. But the evidence was right there in front of them, undeniable and terrifying. I need to come to the institute, Nathan said suddenly. In person. We need to study Tyler, run more tests, figure out exactly what's happening to him. And we need to do it quietly, Velna, because if the Galactic Council finds out about this before we understand it... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Velna knew exactly what would happen. The Council had strict protocols for dealing with species that posed potential threats to galactic stability. Humans were already viewed with suspicion by many species. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, too quick to expand and colonize. If the Council discovered that humans carried the genetic legacy of apex predators, creatures that had ruled their world for millions of years... There's something else, Velna said. I did a preliminary search through human medical records, looking for similar genetic markers. Nathan, Tyler isn't alone. The genes are rare, incredibly rare, but they're there. About 3 in every 100,000 humans carry some version of them. Nathan's eyes widened. That's tens of thousands of people across all the human colonies. Most of them probably have such diluted traces that they'll never activate. But some of them. Velna pulled up a list of names, medical records flagged by her search algorithm. Some of them have histories of unusual healing, exceptional physical abilities, higher than normal body temperatures. The signs were always there, Nathan. We just never knew what we were looking at. We need to find them, Nathan said urgently. Before the Council does. Because if they decide that dragon-blooded humans are a threat... He stopped, swallowing hard. Velna, promise me you'll keep Tyler safe. Whatever happens, don't let them take him. I promise, Velna said, though she had no idea how she was going to keep that promise. After she ended the call, Velna sat in her darkened laboratory, staring at the dragon reconstruction still displayed on her screen. Somewhere in the medical wing, Tyler Bennett was sleeping, his body temperature continuing its slow climb toward something that would have killed any normal human. But Tyler Bennett wasn't normal. Not anymore. He was becoming something humanity had forgotten it could be, something powerful and ancient and utterly unprecedented in galactic history. And Velna had no idea whether that was humanity's salvation or its doom. Nathan arrived at the Galactic Medical Institute 6 days after Velna's call, and by then, everything had changed. The Galactic Council had gotten wind of something unusual happening in the medical wing. They hadn't found out about the dragon genes yet, but they knew a human patient was displaying abilities that defied explanation, and that was enough to trigger their protocols for potential security threats. Tyler was no longer in the recovery ward. He'd been moved to a secure observation facility 3 levels below ground, behind reinforced doors that could withstand a military assault. The official term was protective quarantine for unusual medical cases. Everyone knew what it really meant. Tyler was a prisoner. Velna met Nathan at the main entrance, her expression grim. They have him locked up like he's dangerous. He hasn't hurt anyone, hasn't threatened anyone. All he did was heal too fast, and now they're treating him like a criminal. How is he handling it? Nathan asked as they walked through the corridors toward the secure wing. Better than I would be. He's frustrated, obviously, but mostly he just seems confused. He keeps asking what he did wrong. Velna's voice was tight with anger. What he did wrong was survive when he should have died, and apparently that's enough to make him a threat to galactic security. They passed through 3 security checkpoints before reaching Tyler's room. It wasn't a cell exactly, there was a bed, a desk, some basic amenities, but the transparent wall at the front was 6 inches of reinforced polymer, and the door required clearance from at least 2 council members to open. Tyler was sitting on the bed when they arrived, and Nathan got his first look at the man who was causing such a stir. He looked perfectly normal at first glance. A human in his early 30s, average height, dark hair, the kind of guy you'd pass on the street without a second thought. But there was something different about him now, something Nathan couldn't quite define. The way he held himself, maybe. An intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there in the medical photos Velna had sent. Dr. Cross, Tyler said, standing up to approach the transparent barrier. Dr. Velna told me you were coming. She said you might be able to explain what's happening to me. Nathan glanced at Velna, who nodded slightly. They'd agreed to tell Tyler everything. He deserved to know the truth about what he was becoming. Tyler, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, Nathan began. But I need you to listen carefully and try to keep an open mind. Over the next 20 minutes, Nathan explained everything they'd discovered. The genetic match with the dragon fossils. The theory about ancient DNA seeding. The dormant genes that had been triggered by his exposure to those strange minerals in the mining accident. Tyler listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from disbelief to wonder to something that looked almost like recognition. Dragons, Tyler said softly when Nathan finished. I've been dreaming about them. Every night since the accident. I thought they were just nightmares, stress from the trauma. But they felt so real, like memories instead of dreams. Velna leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. What kind of memories? Flying, Tyler said, his voice distant. I remember what it felt like to fly, to feel the air currents under my wings. I remember hunting, but not for food, for sport, for the joy of the chase. And I remember. He paused, struggling to put the sensations into words. I remember understanding things. Complex things. Mathematics, physics, chemistry. Not in words or numbers, but in feelings and instincts. Like the knowledge was built into my bones. Nathan exchanged a startled glance with Velna. Tyler, dragons weren't supposed to be intelligent. At least not like that. The fossil record suggested they were just animals, predators with sophisticated hunting strategies but nothing approaching human-level cognition. The fossil record was wrong, Tyler said simply. He moved to the wall of his cell, pressing his palm against the transparent polymer. They were brilliant. They understood the world in ways we're only beginning to grasp. And they knew they were dying. I can feel that memory too, the desperation, the fear of extinction. They wanted to survive, somehow, in whatever form they could. So they rewrote the genetic code of the primates that lived in their world, Nathan said slowly. They gave us, a piece of themselves, hoping that someday when the conditions were right, their legacy would awaken. Tyler nodded. And now it has. In me and apparently in others too. He looked at Velna. You found more people with these genes, didn't you? Yes, Velna confirmed. Thousands of them, scattered across human colonies. Most have such diluted traces that they'll probably never activate. But some. She pulled up a data pad showing him a list of names. Some have markers almost as strong as yours. If they were exposed to the same minerals you were, they might undergo the same transformation. The council isn't going to like that, Tyler said grimly. They already think I'm dangerous. What happens when they find out there could be thousands more like me? As if in answer to his question, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights flashed along the corridors, and automated voices announced a security breach in calm, emotionless tones. What's happening? Nathan demanded. A guard rushed past their position, then stopped when he saw them. There's been an incident in the main plaza. A human woman collapsed, started running a high fever. She's displaying unusual strength, It took 6 security officers to restrain her. The council has ordered an immediate lockdown of all humans currently in the institute. Velna's face went pale. She pulled up her data pad, accessing the institute's patient records. Her name is Rebecca Hayes. She works in the geology lab. 2 days ago, she was analyzing mineral samples from Theta Station, Tyler finished. The same mine where I had my accident. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Rebecca had been exposed to the same ancient minerals. Her dormant dragon genes had been triggered, just like Tyler's. And now she was going through the same transformation, except she had no idea what was happening to her, no one to explain the changes her body was undergoing. They're going to be terrified of her, Nathan said urgently. They don't understand what's happening. They'll see her as a threat, maybe even try to. He was interrupted by the sound of shouting from somewhere above them, followed by a deep, resonating boom that shook the entire building. Dust fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. That came from the plaza level, Velna said, her voice shaking. What is she doing? Tyler pressed both hands against the barrier of his cell, his eyes distant and unfocused. She's scared, he said softly. She's confused and scared, and her body is reacting on instinct. The dragon genes aren't just physical, they come with reflexes, defensive responses that were developed over millions of years of evolution. If she feels threatened. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Another boom echoed through the building, closer this time. On the security monitors mounted in the corridor, Nathan could see chaos unfolding. The woman, Rebecca, was surrounded by armed guards, but she wasn't attacking them. She was backing away, her hands raised in a defensive posture, while the floor around her feet showed scorch marks and melted polymer. She's generating heat, Velna breathed. Just like Tyler, but faster, more intense. She's not controlling it. Because she doesn't know how, Tyler said urgently. He turned to face them, his expression desperate. You have to let me talk to her. I can help her understand what's happening, show her how to control it. If you leave her like this, scared and cornered, someone is going to get hurt. The council will never allow it, Velna said. They're already calling you a security risk. If they see 2 of you together, then people might die, Tyler interrupted. Is that what you want? Because that's what's going to happen if you leave her alone. The dragon instincts are strong, especially when first awakened. If she perceives a real threat, her body will respond and she won't be able to stop it. Nathan made a decision that would probably end his career. He pulled out his security override card, a privilege granted to senior researchers for emergency situations, and swiped it through the lock on Tyler's cell. Retry. The door to Tyler's cell slid open with a soft hiss, and for a moment, everyone froze. Tyler stepped through cautiously as if he couldn't quite believe he was free. Then another explosion rocked the building from somewhere above, and they were all running. This is insane, Velna muttered as they sprinted through the corridors, heading toward the plaza level. I'm going to lose my medical license. Nathan, you're going to get deported from every human colony in the galaxy. Probably, Nathan agreed, breathing hard as they climbed the emergency stairs. But we'll be alive to deal with the consequences. They emerged onto the plaza level to find complete chaos. The wide open space that normally served as a gathering area for institute staff and visitors was now a war zone. Scorch marks streaked across the polished floor. Several planters had been reduced to slag. And in the center of it all stood Rebecca Hayes, surrounded by a ring of security personnel who looked like they were seriously reconsidering their career choices. Rebecca was trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Heat waves radiated from her body, making the air shimmer and distort. Her clothes were smoking at the edges, and her skin had taken on a faint reddish glow. Tears streamed down her face, evaporating almost instantly from the heat. I don't know what's happening, she was saying, her voice breaking. I don't know how to stop it. Please just stay back. I don't want to hurt anyone. One of the guards, a hulking Vornax with natural armor plating, took a step forward. You need to surrender yourself for medical evaluation. Comply now and no harm will come to you. She can't comply, Tyler called out, striding forward before anyone could stop him. She doesn't know how to control what's happening to her body. If you keep threatening her, you're only going to make it worse. Every weapon in the plaza immediately swiveled to point at Tyler. The guard commander, a stern Crixian with military bearing, held up one clawed hand. Stay where you are, human. You are not authorized to be outside your containment cell. And she's not authorized to be a living furnace, but here we are, Tyler shot back. He kept walking, moving slowly but deliberately toward Rebecca. Everyone needs to lower their weapons and back away. Right now. I cannot allow. You don't have a choice, Tyler interrupted, his voice taking on a tone that made everyone pause. It wasn't threatening exactly, but there was a weight to it, an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient. What's happening to her is going to happen to more humans. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. You can either learn to deal with it peacefully, or you can start a war you absolutely will not win. Rebecca's eyes locked onto Tyler, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition maybe. Or relief at seeing someone who might understand what she was going through. You, she breathed. You're like me. I can feel it. The heat, the power, you have it too. I do, Tyler confirmed, stopping a few meters away from her. The heat radiating from Rebecca's body was intense, but he didn't flinch or step back. And I know how terrifying it is when it first starts. The dreams, the memories that aren't yours, the feeling that your body doesn't belong to you anymore. The dreams, Rebecca repeated, her voice cracking. I see myself flying. I see fire and sky and hunting through clouds. But they're not my memories. They can't be. They're not your memories, Tyler agreed gently. They're older than that. Much older. They're genetic memories, passed down through millions of years, from creatures that lived on Earth long before humans existed. Rebecca stared at him, confusion and fear warring on her face. That's impossible. So is surviving being crushed under 2 tons of rock, Tyler said with a slight smile. So is heating the air around you to temperatures that should melt steel. Impossible seems to be our new normal. Slowly, carefully, Tyler held out his hand. Not to grab her, just offering. I can help you control it. I can show you how to quiet the instincts, how to turn down the heat. But you have to trust me and you have to stop being afraid. Fear makes it worse. The dragon reflexes interpret fear as danger, and they respond accordingly. Dragon reflexes? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. We can explain everything, Velna called from where she and Nathan stood at the edge of the plaza. But first we need to get you both somewhere safe. Somewhere the council can't interfere. The guard commander's tail lashed in agitation. Dr. Velna, you are obstructing official council security protocols. I must insist. Whatever he was about to insist was lost as the main doors to the plaza burst open and a delegation of council members swept in, flanked by more security personnel. At the head of the group was Ambassador Court, a Threxian whose species had been part of the Galactic Council for over 1,000 years. His 3 eyes swiveled to take in the scene, the scorch marks, the terrified human woman, Tyler standing in the open against orders. Seal the exits, Court commanded, his voice resonating with authority. No one leaves this plaza until we understand exactly what is happening here. More guards poured in, blocking every exit. Nathan swore under his breath. They were trapped. Tyler's expression hardened. He turned back to Rebecca, speaking quickly and quietly. Listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to teach you, you need to learn fast. Close your eyes and focus on the heat inside you. Don't try to push it away, that doesn't work. Instead, imagine it as a pool of water. You're not trying to empty the pool, just redirect the flow. Can you feel it? Rebecca closed her eyes, her breathing ragged. I think so. It's like fire in my chest, spreading through my whole body. Good. Now imagine channels, pathways for that energy to follow. Not out into the air where it burns everything, but down into the ground, into the stone beneath your feet. Stone can absorb heat. It's been doing it since the dawn of time. Ambassador Court was speaking, something about containment and potential threats to galactic security, but Tyler ignored him. All his focus was on Rebecca, on teaching her what he'd learned through trial and error over the past week. I can feel it, Rebecca whispered. The pathways. It's like the knowledge was always there, just sleeping. That's exactly what it is, Tyler confirmed. The dragons understood energy in ways we're only beginning to grasp. They could channel it, shape it, use it. And now so can we. The temperature around Rebecca began to drop. The shimmering heat waves faded. The reddish glow in her skin diminished to nothing. She opened her eyes and they were clear and focused. I did it, she said, wonder in her voice. I actually did it. You did, Tyler agreed, smiling. Then his smile faded as he turned to face the council delegation. Now comes the hard part. Convincing them that we're not a threat. Ambassador Court stepped forward, his 3 eyes fixed on Tyler with an expression that was hard to read. You speak of dragons. You claim to carry their genetic legacy. Do you have any idea what you're suggesting? Dragons, according to Earth's own fossil records, were apex predators. Creatures that ruled their world through power and dominance. That's what the fossils show, Nathan interjected, stepping forward despite Velna's attempt to hold him back. But fossils can only tell us so much. They show us bones and teeth, but they don't show us behavior, intelligence, or intent. And you claim to know better than your own scientific evidence? Court challenged. I claim that we're seeing evidence now that changes everything we thought we knew, Nathan shot back. Tyler can access genetic memories from these creatures. He's experiencing their knowledge firsthand. And what he's learning suggests that dragons weren't just brutal predators. They were intelligent, sophisticated, and compassionate enough to ensure their legacy would survive long after they were gone. Retry. Ambassador Court's 3 eyes narrowed as he studied Tyler and Rebecca. The entire plaza had gone silent, every guard and council member waiting to see how this confrontation would resolve. The tension was thick enough to taste. Compassionate, Court repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. You're asking us to believe that apex predators, creatures built for destruction, were compassionate? Based on what evidence? The fever dreams of 2 humans who've been exposed to unknown substances. Not fever dreams, Tyler said firmly. He took a step forward, his posture unthreatening but confident. Memories. Real memories encoded in DNA and passed down through millions of years of evolution. I know how that sounds, Ambassador. I know it defies everything we understand about genetics and inheritance. But it's happening whether you believe it or not. Then prove it, Court demanded. Show us something that would convince a rational being that you're accessing ancient knowledge and not simply experiencing hallucinations brought on by biological stress. Tyler glanced at Rebecca, then back at the ambassador. What do you want me to prove? Court gestured to one of his assistants, who hurried forward carrying a data pad. These are mineral samples from the Theta Station mine. The same materials that triggered your transformation. Our best scientists have been analyzing them for the past 3 days and cannot determine their composition. They don't match any known elemental structures. If you truly possess ancient knowledge, tell us what they are. The assistant held out the data pad, showing complex molecular diagrams that looked like nothing Nathan had ever seen before. The structures were bizarre, elements arranged in configurations that should have been unstable, impossible even. Tyler studied the display for a long moment, his expression distant. When he spoke, his voice had changed slightly, taking on that same ancient quality Nathan had heard earlier. They're not natural formations, not in the traditional sense. The dragons created them. They understood that certain mineral structures could store energy, not just heat or kinetic force but biological energy. Life force, if you want to call it that. These crystals were designed to preserve genetic information, to keep it viable across geological timescales. The Threxian scientist standing next to Court made a dismissive gesture. Preposterous. No natural process could create such stable molecular bonds. The energy requirements alone would be immense, Tyler interrupted. Which is why the dragons used geothermal vents. They found places where the planet's core energy came close to the surface and used that power to forge these crystals. Each one is essentially a genetic capsule, programmed to activate when it comes into contact with compatible DNA. The mining accident broke open deposits that had been sealed for 66 million years. When the dust got into my lungs, into my bloodstream, it found the dormant dragon genes in my DNA and woke them up. The scientist's face had gone pale. That's actually consistent with what we've observed. The energy signatures, the unusual stability. But how could you possibly know? Because I remember making them, Tyler said softly. Not me, obviously. But the dragons whose genetic memory I carry. I remember the desperation, the urgency. They knew an extinction event was coming, the asteroid that would end their world. They had enough warning to prepare, to preserve what they could of themselves. So they seeded the early primates with their DNA and created these crystals as activation triggers, hoping that millions of years later, when the conditions were right, their legacy would awaken in humanity. The plaza was absolutely silent. Even the skeptical ambassador seemed shaken by the conviction in Tyler's voice, the specificity of the details he was providing. Rebecca spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. I'm seeing things too. Different memories, different perspectives. I remember teaching, not with words or lectures but with demonstrations. Young ones, hatchlings, learning to control their fire, to channel energy safely. The dragons weren't solitary creatures. They lived in communities, raised their young together, protected each other. They weren't monsters. They were people, just in a very different form. Velna stepped forward, her data pad held up for everyone to see. I've been analyzing the genetic markers in both Tyler and Rebecca. The dragon DNA isn't randomly distributed, it's concentrated in specific areas. The parts of the brain associated with empathy and social bonding. The regions that control protective instincts. Ambassador, these genes don't make humans more aggressive. They make them more protective. Protective of what? Court demanded. Of those who can't protect themselves, Nathan interjected. That's what dragons were at their core. Yes, they were powerful, possibly the most powerful creatures to ever live on Earth. But that power wasn't used for conquest or domination. It was used for guardianship. They protected their territories, their young, their communities. And when they knew they were dying, they passed that same instinct on to humanity. As if to demonstrate the point, an alarm suddenly blared from another section of the Institute. A panicked voice came over the comm system. Medical emergency in Wing 7. Structural failure in the pediatric ward. Repeat, structural failure in the pediatric ward. Without hesitation, Tyler was running. Rebecca was right behind him, both of them moving with speed that shouldn't have been possible. The guards tried to stop them, but they were already gone, disappearing down a corridor before anyone could react. Stop them. Court shouted, but Nathan grabbed his arm. Let them go, Nathan urged. Let them show you what they really are. They followed at a run, the entire entourage of council members and security personnel racing through the Institute's corridors. They arrived at Wing 7 to find chaos. A support beam had collapsed, bringing down part of the ceiling and trapping a dozen young aliens, children of various species who were receiving treatment at the Institute. The adult staff were trying to lift the debris, but it was too heavy, the twisted metal and broken concrete refusing to budge. Smoke was filling the air from damaged electrical systems. The children were crying, some injured, all terrified. Tyler and Rebecca didn't pause to assess the situation or wait for proper equipment. They simply moved. Tyler grabbed the largest piece of debris, a support beam that must have weighed several tons, and lifted it like it was made of cardboard. Rebecca focused on the smaller pieces, clearing a path while using her heat abilities with surgical precision to cut through twisted metal without hurting anyone nearby. Within minutes, they created an opening large enough for the medical staff to pull the children free. A young Crixian child, no more than 5 years old, was trapped under a piece of ceiling panel, crying for her mother. Rebecca knelt beside her, speaking softly while carefully heating the metal just enough to make it flexible. She pulled it away gently, then lifted the child into her arms, cradling her with infinite care. The last child out was a human boy, maybe 7 years old, his leg clearly broken. Tyler picked him up as gently as if he were made of glass, whispering reassurances as he carried him to the waiting medical team. You're okay now. You're safe. I've got you. Ambassador Court stood at the entrance to the ward, watching it all unfold. His 3 eyes took in every detail, the impossible strength used with perfect control, the dangerous abilities wielded with surgical precision, the fierce protectiveness in every action Tyler and Rebecca took. When the last child was safe, Tyler and Rebecca stood together, breathing hard, covered in dust and ash. They made no move to run or fight. They simply waited, ready to face whatever judgment the council would deliver. Court stepped forward slowly. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied the 2 humans who had just saved a dozen lives without a second thought. The council has protocols for dealing with potentially dangerous species, he finally said. Protocols that have kept the galaxy safe for thousands of years. And by those protocols, you should be contained, studied, possibly exiled to quarantine worlds until we fully understand what you are and what threat you might pose. Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He simply waited. However, Court continued, those protocols were written for predators. For species that use power for domination. What I just witnessed was not predatory behavior. He looked around at the destroyed ward, the frightened but safe children, the staff members whose lives had been saved by impossible intervention. What I witnessed was exactly what Dr. Cross described. Protection. Guardianship. He turned to address the gathered council members and security personnel. These humans, and potentially thousands more like them, are not becoming more dangerous. They're becoming more protective. And perhaps, in a galaxy that too often prioritizes profit over people and power over compassion, that's exactly what we need.